You're listening to Following On with me, Neil Manthorp, and former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. England's collapse in Rajkot saw them lose the third test by 434 runs, a record defeat, to go 2-1 down in the series, and we'll get the thoughts of England captain Ben Stokes. We'll also hear exclusively from England head coach Brendan McCullum and get his thoughts on the possibility of Ben Stokes bowling in this series. Indian cricket writer and broadcaster Chetan Narula will join us after BCCI Secretary Jay Shah warned of severe implications for players who miss domestic cricket to prioritise other cricket. And we'll round up the week's other big stories and pay tribute to South African great Mike Procter, one of the great all-rounders who sadly passed away this week. So plenty to come over the next hour. You're listening to Following On. Harmy, let's start off then in Rajkot, metaphorically. We almost got there, but we instead watched it from the cold of England rather than the 36 degrees in Rajkot. We'll hear from Ben Stokes in just a moment. So many talking points. The focus, as so often in these things, is on what happened at the end on the final day, and a record defeat, 434 runs blown away by 120 for just 122. But I'm quite certain that you will agree that that's not where England lost the Test match.
No, they didn't. They lost it again. They lost it, being a little bit smarter, and they could easily have put themselves in such a driving position in this Test series. They lost it at 220 for 4, and when they capitulated, and they lost the next 16 wickets for 200 runs when the opposition only had 10 men. And that's happened before. We lost the Ashes largely down to the fact that 180 for 1, Nathan Lyon walks off at Lords, and England don't capitalise and seize on that moment. I'm not questioning Joe Root's batting. Joe Root's played nearly 140 Test matches, averaging 50, one of the greatest of all time. I'd question the timing of that shot, especially against Bumrah's opening spell. Get over that. And, get Bumrah into his second and his third spell, even though one of them's always a decent one with reverse swing, and get the spin bowlers bowling all day with no Ashwin. You're just thinking a little bit smarter cricket, and England might have been in a different position. So for me, it was lost in the first innings. Always about first innings runs. I thought they were excellent from a fielding and bowling point of view in that first innings. I thought Mark Wood bowled really well. Spinners bowled nicely. Jimmy contained. England kept India to 400. Was it under 450? So to keep them under 450 on that surface at that size of that ground, especially with the history of the game and the numbers. And I'm thinking, do you know what? England have got a great chance here. At the end of the day's play, Duckett's going well. End of day 2, you're thinking England could get a lead here and really drive this series in their advantage. And day and a bit later, and England have completely capitulated and blown away every chance they had for me in this series. I still think they've got a chance, but I'm just not sure. As much as Ben Stokes goes down the I can win from anywhere, you've got to get your players to believe you. And they do believe him. But can you pick them up again after 434-run defeat? He is superhuman, but the human element of that, I think, might have ramifications inside that dressing room.
Do you know, for the first time ever, I actually believe that there won't be psychological wounding. I actually do believe that Ben Stokes and this team don't care whether they lose by 434 runs or 4 runs. I never ever thought that I'd say that, and all of my history conditions me to believe that when you get beaten by 434 runs, you're going to have a sore backside for a long time, and that your pride will take a long time to recover. But I just I don't see it in these players. I think they really can just put it in the past.
Yeah, they're good at that. They're good at putting it behind them and in the past. But I think in India against this bowling unit, I think that might be easier maybe a lot harder to do than actually the words that they keep coming out with and they're saying. I agree with you. I don't think it matters whether they lose by 4 runs or they lose by 434. They are very, very good at picking themselves up, dusting themselves down, going again as though they've either you wouldn't know if they've just won or they've just lost. But I think the manner of the 122 and the scars that individual battles have had on each other, i.e. the opposition has had on the England batting unit after being bowled out for 122, they last a little bit longer. And I think that's why this might be a little bit more time to get over this defeat. I think when you look at Ben and you look at the group that he's got, you might see a few changes for this next game. We might see Dan Lawrence. I'm assuming we're going to see Ollie Robinson for the first time. Did they go for the extra spin bowler? All that will be in their mind. I think they're going to try and somehow keep Mark Wood in the team. But it'll be interesting to see what happens at Ranchi. He needs to win the toss. That's what he needs to do. And make it easier for him. It'll be largely down to winning the toss. But I still think from a psychological point of view, there were times in that game where you can drive the series in your advantage here. And unfortunately, like the summer, I think that's when sometimes this outlook of cricket can be a little bit reckless and a little bit brainless. But I'd much far watch this team play the way they're playing. And the sort of bounce back ability for that, that new word that was used many, many years ago. They're very, very good at that. So, watch this space when they get to Ranchi. I think there will be the same spring in the step of Ben Stokes when he walks out for the toss.
I just hope that this England cricket team doesn't turn out to be like the Newcastle team of the 90s, Harmy, that were the most watchable, memorable football team I've ever seen. Everybody wanted to watch them. They didn't win anything.
Yeah, I really hope that's not the case. I hope that they do, shut the back door every now and again. But unfortunately, for Kevin Keegan's team, he didn't know, where the door was, or the hinges used to get blown off. Sometimes when you talk to the defenders in that group, I think England need to learn. They need to learn to play that little bit smarter in certain situations. Not all the time, because this is great cricket. But I think in certain situations that the element of recklessness, I think, sometimes comes in and it costs them. And do you know what, man? As I sat there going 556 to win, England are going to get 500 and fall just short, or they're going to get blown out in a session. And obviously it happened to be in the session. But the test match before, when we were in Vishakhapatnam, they made a valiant effort, a great effort, trying to sort of chase down, what they did in that fourth innings. And I thought, again, it wouldn't surprise me if this goes to the big middle of the fifth day, England get 450, 500, and people were dreaming that England could chase 550, 556 to win. But also in the back of mind, you were thinking the wheels could come off here. And they came off with such a gusto. They got bowled out. 50 for 7, bowled out for 122. And that didn't surprise me either.
Okay, this was what Ben Stokes said about the style of cricket afterwards.
It's just about us accepting that we're going to have bad days, regardless of how you choose to play. We've got a style of cricket that we know suits us as individuals and as a team, and it doesn't always pay off, and we're realistic to that. But we know if we keep going out with the best intentions to push the game forward like we want to, when a couple of guys have their day out, we're a very hard team to play against.
That was England captain Ben Stokes, understandably or predictably justifying England's approach. There was a little bit of a distraction. We'll just we'll mention this. We won't focus on it. I think it was unfortunate that that Stokes and McCullum were seen talking to the match referee, because then they were asked about it, and then this whole subject of DRS came up, and Stokes did say, "Look, it's got nothing to do with the result. We know we've lost by 430 runs." But he was saying that umpires' calls should be removed, in his opinion, and it became a little bit of a distraction. England had 3 what they thought were very unfortunate or even unlucky umpires call decisions go against them. But again, like I said, it's a distraction. But it seems to me that he's not quite understanding why umpires call is there, and why it's supposed to cover any slight marginal technical difficulties that DRS has. You know, that what did that say, that percentage margin for error, is it like 0.5%, something like that?
Yeah, such a great area that we talked about it on a breakfast show with Jeff Stelling, and it's like football's got so many great areas when they're talking about VAR. Cricket hasn't got too many because the majority of them are line decisions. But this one has got a little bit of of a grey area to it. And the umpire's call for me comes down to whether the umpire's good enough to make the right decision in the first place. Don't want to be too critical of the umpires, but I look at this game and go, Akuma Damasina and Joe Wilson, I think they're two of the worst umpires on the circuit. I don't think they're very good. Damasina especially. And I think, especially at home, buckle under the pressure of of India. Not have anything to do with India, because of the powerhouse they are. I just think they're very, very home advantage wherever they are in the world. These two types of umpires. So the umpire's call is always going to go against, I think, for England. And like Ben said, we're not feeling sorry for ourselves. This is not why we lost the game. But if you're Zach Crawley, you're going, hold on, I'm in a decent run of form here. I've come off the back of a good Ashes series. He's got 270s in this series so far, and he's been given out two absolute shockers on umpire's call, and that that swings and roundabouts, I'm sure. But I'm not a big fan of the umpire's call bit. Yeah, even though I'm a bowler, the minute the umpire puts his finger up and it goes to umpire's call, then the stumps get bigger. So what the answer is, I'm not so sure. But I'm with Ben here. I'm not a big fan of the umpire's call. Same as a soft signal. Make an umpire make the decision. Just get it right. And unfortunately, I don't think the umpires have got it right in this series more often than they've been wrong. Sorry, in the series more often than they've got it right.
Okay, let's finish this section then by listening to what Stokes had to say about DRS after the game.
I think you just want some kind of, I don't know, like level playing field, I guess. I think the umpires have an incredibly hard job as it is, especially out in India when the ball's spinning and bouncing, sometimes not. My personal opinion is that if the ball's hitting the stumps, the ball's hitting the stumps. I think it should take away umpire's call, if I'm being perfectly honest. But I don't want to get too much into it because then it sounds like we're moaning about that. That's why we lost.
Okay, let's hear now from England Test head coach Brendan McCullum. He's been reflecting on last week's defeat in the third Test with talkSPORT's man in India, Cameron Ponsonby.
First of all, it's brilliant that he's got himself in a position, 8-9 weeks on from a knee operation, because of the hard work that he's put in, where bowling's even potentially on the table. So, we'll just have to wait and see. Ben's very clever. He wouldn't do anything which he doesn't think is right to do. So if he does decide to bowl, then you get a pretty good idea that his knee feels good.
It was Brendan McCullum chatting to our man on tour in India, Cameron Ponsonby. I have to ask you straight away, Harmy. Ben was very, very clear himself about his workload management, or building up his workload, I should say, as a bowler and all-rounder. And he was quite categorically clear before the tour started that he would not bowl in this series. And we saw him in Hyderabad, bowling maybe 10 balls off 2 or 3 paces, and he did not look like a man who might play a role in a month's time. But it did sound there like he's making a lot quicker progress than he or anybody else thought.
Yeah, it looks as though natural. Ben Stokes has got, he seems to have a high pain threshold. He gets himself back fit very, very quickly. We've seen, to get himself ready for the first Test match, what he's had to go through after having a knee operation. I can't see him bowling at all. I don't think it would be. I think it would be ill-advised if he did bowl. I think there's a lot more cricket further down the line, more important cricket further down the line for Ben Stokes to be fully fit for, whether that's bat, bowl, field, and as captain. Just for the sake of members bowling 5 overs here or 5 overs there in the 4th or the 5th Test match. So I'd be very, very surprised. I'd be amazed if the medical staff let him on the field with bowling boots on, first and foremost, just to make sure and preserve the rest of his bowling career. Because I think this summer, balancing the side out and what's to come, i.e. Ashes away and things like that, Ben Stokes is going to be so crucial in England's. I think in England's the side balance going forward. I think we've seen the problems we've had in this series. I just don't see him bowling anymore anytime soon. So it'll be a surprise if Ben does bowl. When you look at the rest of the group and the workload and everything that comes with it, I don't see there being too many household changes. I think there'll be 1 or 2. I don't think Bairstow's going anywhere. He talks about root, back in root. I think this is all down to Joe. I think it's down to Joe's mindset, how he constructs these innings. And who are we to have a go at one of the greatest of all time? Who are we to pick holes and faults in a player who averages 50 over 140 Test matches? He's gone through a difficult 3 Test matches where he's made either a poor execution or a decision that, when he reflects on it, it probably wouldn't have made in a different time. But for me, there's nothing wrong with Joe Root. Jonny Bairstow concerns me a little bit more, but I still think Jonny Bairstow and Joe Root will take their place in the same top 7 that have played for these first 3 Test matches.
The Bairstow situation is an awkward one, but the reality is that his last 10 Test innings in India, all right, so 6 here and 4 on the last tour, he's made 4 noughts and has a higher score of 37. I mean, he's a hard pitch batsman, isn't he? I mean, he likes the ball coming on. I just don't know. I mean, look, I mean, the last Test match in Rajkot, he lasted 7 balls. So it's tough to drop a bloke when he's been at the crease for 7 balls. It's not long enough to know whether he's hitting them nicely or not. But it does, personally that loyalty is a vital thing in international cricket, but it can be taken too far.
It can be taken too far, but I think you've got to you take them set of numbers and Jonny can't get away from them. That's why I'm probably more worried about Jonny than I am at Joe. I look at Johnny's movements and he doesn't look as quick on his feet as what he probably has been on other tours. Whether that's pressure, whether he's just completely out of nick. The numbers you've just mentioned, Ollie Pope before the first Test match. Do we play Ollie Pope in that series? Because his average score, his highest score in India was 34. He was averaging less than 15, and he goes and gets an unbelievable 196 to win the first Test match. So I think you have to give a player like Bairstow that little bit more loyalty and time because of what he's done for you. Jonny plays this Test match. If Jonny plays a 4th and he plays a 5th, he's played 100 Test matches, averaging mid-30s, wicketkeeper every now and again, all the way up and down the order. Jonny's been your man that you've asked so many times to do a job for you, whether it's to bat at number 3, to bat at number 5, keep wicket, all these things. So I think the loyalty can work both ways, and I think it should do it this time. But that's only going to last so long. Jonny's going to have to get himself out of it. I think if I was Brendan McCullum, in the positivity that McCullum Stokes gives, I'd be putting my arm around Jonny and telling him how good he is and why he is still regarded as one of the IPL best players. You're batting number 5 and just go and hit the ball. At the minute, he seems as though the ball's hitting him. You go and hit the ball, and if you get out, slogging one up in the air, well, it's better than being timid and the ball hitting you on the pad when you've missed it by a foot because you're not mentally, I'm feeling as though you're going at the ball and you're going to try and hit the ball. So I think I'd be encouraging them if I was McCullum to go and be ultra aggressive, because that seems to be, your more natural game, Jonny Bairstow, and hopefully he does that in the fourth test.
Okay, and just finally, we've given up the old conventional views. Oh, well, you don't do that in test matches, and you wouldn't do that in terms of selection, because we thought that there was no way England would play three spinners and one seamer. That's exactly what they did in Hyderabad. So, and I know that you probably will say you don't want to go in with two new seamers. You don't want to replace Wood and Anderson. They are back-to-back test matches. We have been led to believe that Mark Wood won't play back-to-back test matches. So the possibility does arise that Robinson and Gus Atkinson could both be selected if England go two seamers again in Ranchi.
Yeah, we don't understand, because obviously we're on the ground in Vizag. We could see that they were probably going to make the decisions that they were going to make. Same with Hyderabad. We didn't really understand what was going to happen in Rajkot, and with the same little bit from 5,000 miles away, what's going to happen in Ranchi, what the pitch is looking like. I think the balance of the attack looked better with two seamers, two spinners, and obviously Joe. I would like them to play, if again we on a similar surface, I'd like them to play two seamers. I'd do everything I possibly could to make Mark Wood play, because I think he gave us the point of difference, especially in that first innings. If you lose the toss, a little bit of pace through the air. I wouldn't have a problem them both being rolled out again, Wood and Anderson, if Anderson's in a position to do that. But I think because of freshness, England might go Robinson over Anderson, and I'd keep Wood in the side. If you're going to gamble, you've got to try and win two test matches. You've got to gamble. You've got to pick your best bowlers. And for me, your best two seamers are Wood and Anderson. But if there is any sort of hangover from what happened in Rajkot with a short turnaround, and if it is going to be too much for one of them, and if Anderson's the one that makes way, and then you've got an able deputy in Robinson. First time seeing him in this series. But I do everything in my power to make sure Mark Wood plays. He plays this 5 days, and then you don't play him in the last test match. But I think you've got to win. You've got to have your X factor bowler, and for me, Wood has to play in this game if you feel as though you're going to play two seamers as opposed to playing three spinners.
Now then, Mike Procter, who English cricket lovers, particularly Gloucestershire fans, will remember with enormous fondness, passed away on Saturday at the age of 77. As with many great players, there is always a debate about the standard and intensity of the game between different eras. However, with Mike Procter, that isn't the case. He played his cricket in the 70s, but he bowled with undoubted pace and hostility, and his runs were extraordinary. He scored at one point 600s in consecutive first-class games. So he could bat at four, opened the bowling, and when his knees went because of his famously long run-up, he turned to off-spin and took another 150 wickets, first-class wickets, bowling off-spin. He really was a cross-generational cricketer, and he became South Africa's first coach when they returned to international cricket after isolation. And his favourite moment, and he played a massive role in this game actually, was when South Africa played their first test at Lord's after a break of 29 years. And they went on to win that game by 356 runs late on the fourth evening. And this was Procky 4 years ago when he was still serving as a match referee, reflecting on of all his cricketing achievements on the field. This was his favourite moment of his career when he was coach of the South African team, which won that return to Lord's in 1994. This was him talking 4 years ago.
We got back into international cricket in 92 because we were fortunate enough to go to the World Cup. And people must remember that Nelson Mandela was only inaugurated in 94. It wasn't 92. So cricket had the blessing of the ANC and had the blessing of Nelson Mandela. Otherwise, we certainly wouldn't have got back into Test cricket at 92 and we wouldn't have played in that World Cup. But we had their blessing, and it was I sort of dedicated that victory to Nelson Mandela, because it was something very special. Being back in England, England's been very close to my heart, and learnt most of my cricket in England. And to come back at Lords and win a Test match the way we did was pretty special. And Lords is one of those grounds. Cricketers around the world are asked which is your favourite ground, which country, whatever. And in my mind, it's not even a question, because Lords just has everything. It has the traditions. It's just a beautiful place to play cricket, and I was very fortunate that I've always done well at that ground. It really seems to bring out the best in me.
That was Mike Procter, who passed away on Saturday at the age of 77, reflecting. Harmy, I'll tell you why he played such a big role in that. There was a series of iconic photographs of South Africa on the Lord's dressing room balcony with the new South African flag draped over the railings. And it was fascinating because, as I said, it was South Africa's first game at Lord's for 29 years. And less than 3 months before that game, the new South African flag had been unveiled for the first time. And a lot of white South Africans were skeptical about the future, cynical about the changes that were occurring in South Africa. And a number of them didn't have this new flag, the South African supporters, and a couple of old South African flags, which of course were associated with apartheid, appeared in the Lord's stands. And I know that banners and posters are always banned at Lord's, but they reiterated that any flags and banners and posters were banned at Lord's. And Procky actually, and I'll never forget. He said I know about Lord's regulations, because of course he spent many years playing there. He said they're not going to stop me taking this flag in, and he smuggled it in on the third day, and then very proudly he said, I want the world to see the new South African flag. They're not going to stop me from waving my flag. And he took it in there, and of course it was photographed and has been displayed for years and years and years. And I'll never forget saying to him, it seems unusually prescient now, but I did say to him at the time, I said, Procky, the number of photographs that were taken with you with that South African flag on the Lord's change room, I said, that you might be remembered more for that than anything you did on the field in years to come. And he laughed and he said, I hope so.
Great man. Yeah, great man, great memories. And passionate of him on more than one occasion. I've shared a beer with him on more than one occasion. Heard a lot about Mike Procter through the likes of Jeff Cook, who was the director of cricket, coach at Durham. Jeff was of that generation, that great generation of players when Two Overseas was playing. And, a lot of the South African players who weren't playing at national cricket were playing in England in first-class cricket. Gloucestershire will obviously mourn the passing of one of their probably greatest ever overseas players. And Manners, you obviously you knew him a lot better than I did. His hunger for the game and drive for the game to be better, not just in South Africa but around the world, because obviously going into the ICC panel and being a match referee, he had time for everybody. He wanted the game to be better. He managed the game very, very well when he was a referee. But he was part of that sort of golden generation of South Africans who were lost to international cricket. The likes of Graham Pollock, we've heard Mike Procter there talk to us during a rain delay in South Africa a few years ago. Barry Richards was another one. These guys were, their stats from an international point of view will not tell the true story of not just how great players they were, but great characters they were in the game.
And Graham Pollock, of course, is the most obvious one. He finished his 27 Test matches with an average of over 60. You're right. There were a number of ways to look at the isolation when South Africa were prevented for 20 years from playing international cricket. But there's no doubt that it was the right decision. And Procky accepted that. He played 7 Test matches and took 41 wickets at 15. And overall, his numbers are just astonishing. He took 1,417 first-class wickets at 19 and a half. Okay, 1,417 wickets at 19 and a half, but add in almost 22,000 runs, including 48 hundreds and 109 50s. It was truly astonishing. I think, Harmy, I'm right in saying that he is the only player after whom a county was renamed, because they called Gloucestershire Proctershire, didn't they?
Yeah, Proctershire, but it did in that time as well, man. We're talking about, we always go about comparing, Stokes, Flintoff, both of them. But at that time, in around that time, you had the likes of Sir Ian Botham. He came a little bit after Procky, but he's a little bit younger than Procter. But you had Kapil Dev, Sir Ian Botham, Richard Hadley, Imran Khan, Mike Procter. What a great golden generation of all-rounders that was.
Yeah, and I mean, nobody suggests that Procter wouldn't have been amongst them, if not at the very top. I mean, it sounds scandalous to suggest that he might have been better than any of those names that you've just mentioned, but he was a truly astonishing cricketer, and I just want to reiterate the point that he had no bitterness about the price that he and other players of his generation paid by not playing more international cricket. Vince van der Bijl, who of course had that astonishing season when he took 80 wickets for Middlesex in 1981, he was at the very forefront of saying we should never have played international cricket. He didn't, of course, Vince didn't, but Barry Richards played 4 Test matches and finished with an average of 72, got 200s in 4 tests against Australia. But it was, if you think of the price that many South Africans paid, the vast majority, over 90% of South Africans for decades and decades, I think the price they paid during apartheid, Vince van der Bijl and Mike Procter used to say, okay, so we missed out on 30 or 40 Test matches. It's a game of cricket. It's not a brutal apartheid regime that that we're talking about. So, he spent the last 5 years working actively with underprivileged cricket clubs and young players in Durban, his hometown, trying to use the game as a tool to improve life and society. So he will be very, very sadly missed, Harmy.
Yeah, sad time, but great man.
Let's move on then to another story that just caught my eye. It's quite remarkable, actually. Tim Southey and Kane Williamson played their 50th Test matches together, and they're now set to play their 100th Test matches together. Quite extraordinary that they should be in such sync, and they've played their entire careers together, and of course Williamson handed over the Test captaincy to Southey 18 months ago.
Yeah, 2 great players, 2 good. They talk about Tim Southey playing his 100th Test. I think his first Test was a game I played in 2008, or a game I got dropped for, one of the two, in 2008. So it just shows you the length of time. He made his Test debut, I think 5 years before Joe Root. So it just shows you how much cricket New Zealand play from a Test match point of view. But 2 great guys, 2 great characters. We've had Kane on the show. I'm disappointed that Trent Bolt's not involved, because I think that would have been in New Zealand at full strength. But to see Southey and Williamson get rewarded for the longevity of their careers is great. And New Zealand they seem to be getting stronger and stronger. So two wonderful ambassadors of the game of cricket, not just in New Zealand, but cricketers around the world.
Very quickly, Carl Jameson. So sad for the big New Zealand all-rounder. And it's one of the reasons that Australia are so so sensitive about the workload of their big all-rounder, Cameron Green. But Jameson spent almost a year out of the game with a stress fracture of the back, finally worked his way back to fitness, got back into the team, and he's out again. And they reckon it'll be another year, and it's another stress fracture of the back.
It's sad, very, very sad, especially in a country like New Zealand, where, from a financial point of view, you are not as well looked after as possibly somewhere in England or somewhere like Australia or the more higher profile countries which have got bigger revenue streams to look after their players. You lose your central contract, then you don't have as sort of good sort of being looked after from a medical point of view. That is a concern for somebody like Kyle Jamieson. You look at somebody like Pat Cummins, Australia waited 7 years for him. England might have to wait the same length of time for Jofra Archer. Have New Zealand got the financial capabilities to look after somebody for such a long period of time, knowing that he might never play the game again? That is some difficult times ahead for Kyle James. He's gone through quite a bit already in his career, so we wish him well because he is a very, very talented cricketer. But what the future holds is it would be a concern for the big fast bowler.
Okay, it's time for the final word. We've just got a couple of minutes left, or 1 minute left. And I thought this week, Harmy, we had to give the final word to Ben Duckett. At the end of day 3, he said, "Whatever they set us, we'll have fun chasing them down. The more, the merrier." I honestly don't know what to make of this. I mean, I like the optimism, but is he having a laugh? I mean, in some parts of the world, they'd call him a chop for saying that.
Yeah, I must admit, when I seen that and I heard that, I was like, "Really, Ben? Do you want to go down that? You want to go down that road? Because they're going to give you at least 550, and you're, like we said earlier in the show, they're going to get bowled out in a session, or they're going to get really close to it." Over there, big statements like that, they do come back sometimes to bite you on the backside. Cricket has a way of biting you on the backside. He played an unbelievable innings, which I think is largely forgetting about, to be honest. His 155 is largely being forget about because of how poorly England ended the game. But he coming out with statements like "the more the merrier." I'm not so sure. But hey, I love his optimism. I understood what he was trying to say. He was trying to give the big "I am" to the dressing room. We can get whatever these lot give us. But unfortunately, the history of the game tells you not many times over 250, between 250 and 350 is chased in the fourth innings anywhere in the world. And the more the merrier. 122 all out says everything from that point of view. But we like his spirit and keep batting the way you're batting, Ben. But not tone it down a little bit, but a little bit like what I have to do sometimes. Think before you speak.
You've been listening to Following On here on talkSPORT 2 with me, Neil Manthorp, and former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. If you've missed any of the show or you wish to catch up, you can download the podcast from the Following On feed, available as always from the free talkSPORT app or wherever else you get your podcasts. We'll be back next week to look back at the 4th test between India and England. Every ball, of course, live and exclusive here on talkSPORT 2.